Welcome today. We have three authors, three new authors of one book. It's called Triptych, and it is comprised of the work of Peter Grandbois, James McCorkle, and Robert Miltner, three collections which have been put together in one volume. And here it is. This is the cover of Triptych. David Baker writes about this book. A triptych typically depicts a scene, a single picture, in three panels. A trio is one song or one movement played by three musicians. But if this rich new book, Triptych, represents something singular, it is to show a small part of the singular diversity and range of contemporary American poetry. From Peter Grandbois' intimate, disarming lyricism to James McCorkle's chewy, sustained meditations on time and the nature of decay, to Robert Miltner's classical dramas, where the Orphic myth can take us from Creekside to the underworld of Vegas. Each of this book's books is as distinct as each poet's style and manner, splayed or compressed, in lines or in prose, in wonder, in amusement, or in alarm. Over them all hovers the bedeviling circumstance of time, enabler, nemesis, and charm. It imperils the lovers, fractures the landscapes, and confounds the sense of every self. That's David Baker, whose new book is Swift, New and Selected Poems. Welcome, Peter and James and Robert. I'm going to try not to unshare the screen. Stop share. Okay, tell us a little bit. Why don't we start? We'll start, Peter. Tell us a little bit about your book, The Three-Legged World, and your experience of this whole strange process.
Sure. Well, I've been a fiction writer for a good part of my life, and so the poetry world has been a little new to me. The Three-Legged World started out really, in some ways, it's almost a conversation with Fernando Pessoa and his The Book of Disquiet. I was reading the Book of Disquiet at the time and was completely engrossed in it, and found myself wanting to respond to it in some way. And I think that's what started the poems, and that's why I think that I have an epigraph to him and a dedication to his many heteronyms. He had many, as you may know, he wrote poems with hundreds of heteronyms. And so he very much complicated this idea of self and selves, and to the point where it just becomes infinite almost. And so that's really what was behind the book. And it's just been a thrill as far to publish with these two gentlemen. I've long been a fan of James McCorkle's work, had already read some of his work. Robert's work I hadn't read yet, and it was a real treat to get his Hotel Utopia and his other chapbooks and so on, and just start dipping into that world and seeing some of the connections and just some of the. I think David Baker's right. I mean, it's not that we're similar poets in the sense that we're each poem is working the same thematic terrain, but I think we have certain things, little touchstones we touch on that make the work resonate with each other. So it's been a real joy to be part of that process and to be part of a process that really kind of breaks publishing barriers. I'm in favor of that. I'm a little tired of the old, I don't know if it's capitalistic or what it is, but the old model with one book, one author, and I like to see things broken up, and it's a real treat. I think I say in my blurb on the book, bringing us back to the sort of communal origins of poetry, and I like that.
Great. Thank you, Peter. James, maybe you talk a little bit about In Time, which is the title of your contribution to the collection.
I think it builds on my other two books of poems. A lot of the poems are sequential. They're accumulative, sectioned poems. So certainly a poem like reading Basho to my daughter and evidences, and then many of the poems in the Subtle Bodies that you all published, and they're all sectioned and accumulations of lyrics. So they're movements through time, which I think, like Peter was saying and David tapped into in the very beginning with the blurb. These are all three are works that meditate on time and on certain types of myth too. Myth brings us really close, I think, and I think that's really whether it's Robert or Peter or myself, this idea of proximity is very important to poetry. And in that way, Peter's comment about the uniqueness of this project in terms of the world of poetry, whatever that is an exercise in proximity and closeness, and in an interesting way, setting up conversations that might not have taken place otherwise. I like the idea of poets in conversation. I think that's really an essential part of, if you will, poetics in general. So this makes this project, I think, unique and exciting, and then kind of a model for others.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, James, because as I think I just said before we started our program, we're actually doing another kind of triptych that's going to be called Trio, with the work of Deneen Wardrop, Karen Donovan, and Diane Raptosh, and that'll be coming out in 2021. So you guys are the pioneers, and they'll be following in your footsteps. So I hope that we can extend this conversation to both those projects and perhaps even more. Robert Miltner, who is a colleague of mine in the Neo-MFA program and a longtime friend, his book is called Orpheus and Echo. And maybe tell us a little bit about that, Robert.
It's actually started when I was recording a CD with a jazz musician friend of mine. And I was actually working in a recording studio. It felt very under-earthy. And I was thinking about loss and grief, loss, refrain. And I turned to the Orpheus myth, and I wanted to contemporize that. And I wanted it to echo across time. And so I built this central section around a band called Orpheus and Echo, which allowed me then to have transitions across time and space linked by the story. Because I think myths are stories that we're attracted to. And they stay alive because of that. And so, of course, the myths cross time in a way. It was a book wholly unlike, I think, other books of mine, at least on the page. I was experimenting with prose poems that look like fragments where parts have disintegrated. And so I was working with a lot of the idea of the shape and the form. And of course, then the story, the real story of poetry, I think, is always the words. And when I think about the three of our books, I feel like all three of these collections work so well together because the sound, the music, the tonality is so much that all three of these different books are working so well together, because in each of them, the language and the sound of language and the music of it is both so distinct for each of the three books, but it unifies the three of them as well. It just charges me when I first read it.
That's wonderful. I mean, I'm hearing so many of the echoes, if you will, in conversation that make these, provide a kind of connective tissue among books that are pretty diverse. And I think maybe now we could hear a little bit from each one of these books. I mentioned before the program that because of our situation with the COVID, I don't have my copy. It's locked away in the mailroom at Youngstown State University, and I can't get in. So I have that pleasure to look forward to. Of course, I've seen the arcs, so I know what the book looks like, and maybe you guys have all received your copies because you were smart enough to ask for them to come to your home. There we go. So why don't we go back to Peter and ask him to share some work from The Three-Legged World.
Sure, thank you, Phil. And I want to say real quick again, this is just a gorgeous book. I've shown it to people. Everyone just reacts like, wow, what a great job you and the press have done in terms of just the actual object of the book itself. It's really a beautiful book. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll just jump right in. I think I already gave a little bit of a context for the book and read you a few of the poems. This is the opening poem to my part of the book, The Three-Legged World. It's titled, "There is no one to write this. I wake and I am an unknowing. Two people at once, each unreconciled. Will I undone be, swallowed by mad song, fearful of birds and the way they shake fire off their wings at dawn? Or, unstitched by rain, will I bloom to sky like a trout leaping through unbidden air? Will I unthought dissolve into ground, a derelict holding in his fat belly, hunkering down until unsought by Venusa night? Or unhanded by my life's splintered wood, is it possible to float far above this axe-hacked weather? It's unclear what skin binds us to this darkened field, and why only with an unlit candle can we even dream of walking across." Then I'll read just a few poems that, quite a few of the poems in this book, and I became infatuated with the sort of the phrase, sometimes when I, or sometimes I do this. So I have a few poems that start that way. This one is, "Sometimes when I wake." Sometimes when I wake to this whispering of leaves, I want to ask, who are you? And by that I mean this person in my bed, twitching like an epileptic through another fever sleep. If only I could escape this tunnel in which so many selves are buried, like a stunned ant climbing out of a cave-in, fighting each grain of sand to make its way back to the broken neck of the world. And here's another that begins a similar way. Sometimes I think I hear my voice rummaging around in the next room, shouting about this insignificant map of the world. It doesn't like being alone, the way memories grow thick as trees, regrets rooting around you. Once it played a trick and called to me in the voice of one I'd loved, but I saw the trap's teeth jutting through the pine needles across the bedroom floor. We know each other too well. Lately, it started taking credit for little things I do, getting the groceries, doing laundry, that sort of thing. It's relentless. I would tell it to shut up if I could. I would say, this poem is mine. This poem is more real than you. I would say, it's okay that we've parted company. We do not come here to remain whole. And this one's entitled All That Can Be Heard, but begins in a similar vein. All that can be heard. Sometimes I am almost dead. Nothing but a sound of voices turning in the dark. Or is it the darkness speaking, and I am the nothing? The child inside, another word for stillness, for a wilderness of rain in which to bathe, as if we didn't want to take our names with us, as if one voice alone could be heard when the day drains away and all that's left is to listen to the thrill of stars that fall like bees in the night. I'm talking to you. Can you hear me? Take the ghost from your ears and wait until silence is a book without end, a moth-eaten world gone mute, until you are the silence. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. And another one here called Something Like Faith. Today I woke to a gesture made by someone else. The more I tried to remember the gesture, the further I faded, the way evening drains the seen from the unseen, like steam rising from a weakened field. How easy it is to forget the world, to forget the spaces between things are also things. And here's a poem that ends the long way, or the first section, and I think maybe echoes a little bit of what Robert was talking about with some of the sound play and so on, the music. I hope anyway. A long way back. I want to crawl inside this forest of dead light bulbs, unravel into isn't, but I can't be sure the falling sea of voices won't drown me. And I'm exhausted from all the listening, the drone of the traffic, the hum of air conditioning, the pinging of the pipe in the wall to the right of my bed that is not my bed, is not made for me, is not the world I believe in, but a thing I've learned to live with because I can't erase you. Can't face the few derelict shadows edging inward, while these brackish hands stir lies like swallows, circling into no thing, into I won't hear them, into my name is not this porous world, where the best we can do is sing back the fragments we refuse to touch. I'd also like to just read a couple prose poems, since I know Robert's book is primarily prose poems, and I love that field, especially in the second section of my book is all prose poems. So here's one called Why Not This Other Dream? Why not this other dream that limps along behind like a crippled dog, like a man who betrays another's love? Now I don't know where I'm going. Sometimes I'm following the dog, its crooked tail wagging before me. Other times the dog follows me, dragging its back leg. I'm never sure which is which, only that we bark at passing cars and occasionally stop to pee. If I could, I would shoot it, dump it in the ravine beside the road. It would be so easy the way it nuzzles its head beneath my hand, presses its nose to my crotch. One bullet and no more junkyard dances until dawn. So easy, except when it lays its head between its paws as if unable to feel. Then today is yesterday, and I am not me. The dream is not a dog or even a dream. And you, dear reader, are not reading this. Everyone knew exactly what to do next with the lonely moon. And this next one, I mentioned before I was primarily a fiction writer before I entered into the world of poetry. The title of this poem is My Body Haunts Itself. And it's the first poem I ever wrote, honestly. And I was writing a story. It's called The Secret, I believe. It appeared in Kenyon Review. And in the middle of that story, this line appeared to me, and I knew it wasn't part of that story. It was going to be a poem. I just knew that and said it was, and so I thought it was time to write poetry. And now I haven't stopped now for about 6 years, so I'm hooked. So it's called My Body Haunts Itself, and again, a prose poem. My body haunts itself, or rather the memory of my body haunts me. Like a dream that fades the moment you wake. It's there and not there. The flash of a deer leaping across the road before you hit it. The soft, small rain that falls after, erasing the lightning. The mist that cloaks the cottonwoods until licked by morning's fire. This is about you, after all, isn't it? About what happened in the past. Do you still hear it falling? The rain? And I think I'll give a couple more here. How am I alone? How am I only? How am I only myself when disguised, and the sun hard against my transparent body and the far shore of the river? How am I only sorry when silent and dusk buries itself in smoke-soaked breath and the ghosts of letters I will not read? How am I only hungry when falling and the madness of night dispelled by the harvest moon charts the path to forgetting? How am I only aching when inside this useless dream and memory thinning to a wind that refuses to arrive? And this slow sleep tempered by the gray dawn, and this stillness that flies from what we love, and this black blood that never mattered anyway. Everything moves toward the voiceless boundary where we forget it is not inside our luminous selves that we live. I think I'll end with this one. It's not the last poem in this part of the book, but it's one that's a personal favorite of mine, called What Pulls Toward Clearing. October fog hushes the horizon, but not the ghosts needing to be held. And the name we give to longing refers to the many ways we can become lost. As when the fawn follows its mother through the sleeting storm. As when the father leaves his daughter in the hospital waiting room as she pleads for him to stay. As when you tell me goodbye and I can only shake my head no, because everything unfastens and it's all we can do to hang on to winter leaf days. You said that no one remembers in the end, but the truth is that there is no end to remembering. and that everything moves us a little closer to the edge of a closed off field, where if we could retool our eyes to listen to this human sound, we might understand that emptiness is another way to hold both worlds, to gather what little we can. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
James, reading from In Time, James McCorkle.
Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful to hear Peter read. So I'm going to read about 4 poems. The first 2 are the more accumulative poems, or examples of some of the accumulative poems in the book In Time. The first one starts with a series of basically facts from the Iraq Body Count Project, and it's titled Maydays. Maydays. The last day in May 2007 ended with the least rain on record. By the end of May 2007, over 3,300 US soldiers died in Iraq. On the first day of May 2010, a shopkeeper in Mosul is shot dead, part of the ongoing war violence reported by the Iraq Body Count Project. He is one of the over 100,000 documented civilian deaths in Iraq since the beginning of the 2003 invasion due to the war-related violence. May 18, 2010, 1,000 US soldiers have died in Afghanistan. Sleep coils through yellowing grass, walnut trees drop their oils. Soil goes barren, the apricot tree planted last year now wicker. A 4th suicide has been reported. They keep them still in cages there across the Gulf. No accurate count of the dead children, of the poisoning of wells, the infant mortality rate that surges, the bounty of facts. The camps, Gaza, Baghdad, Kabul, are seething. That word is accurate. The temperature rising on summer's long approach, and the crowding, like shooting fish in a barrel, lieutenants say. No one has taken yours, but no one has come for you. The lawns dry, the ground packed with dust, rain's vacancy. Yours and mine have not vanished with no mercy. Each May I rewrite this, adding the numbers again, adding the cities that rhyme, Peshawar, Kandahar, hectares burning, flesh burnt off. Who will look at you when you return? Who will take you as a wife in 5 years? Who will sponge your body down? Forsaken. Is that a word still to be used? Forsaken. That moment in the valley when the shadows grow even in the afternoon's heat, and the apprehension there is no one left, and how bread and water would be more than splendor could offer. So what if could still be said, written, that forsaken could be what we are? There would be no less than that. Finches continue their long song, thickets fill with that wind carried hand to mouth, the valleys open out. What were you thinking then? The grass sear, the sky's one eye bluest in its emptiness, the eye we pass hand to hand, that last name ours, sharpening its beak to tear at us. The psalmist passes. That was then and now. Afternoon lowers itself into the locust trees. Loved ones vanish, only their bodies turn up on the edge of highways, riverbanks, empty rooms. Only their bodies. To say that eclipses their wounds, what goes missing, the number what would be sufficient now to say bodies means flesh, means words made flesh, how we perish, thought perishes, too, with each word, and sorrow, the weather of place. Fox sparrow. Fox sparrow has a reference to Wei Ying Wu, who was a Tang poet, classical Tang poet, writing around circa 750. And I have pulled a couple lines from Red Pine's translations of his work. And his work resonated with me because of his use of landscape and a way in which to look at landscape as a reading of some of the difficulties of life. So fox sparrow. What is known comes, abrupt, jump cut to here, then gone. One banded, caught and released was 10. How many migrations from conifer forest south, or blown across the North Atlantic to Iceland or Greenland, scrabble in the Orkneys, a vagrant there. Fox red bandings with fox gray hooding, autumn chrysanthemums cluttered with maple leaves, waiting for the cherry to drop its last gold leaves. What to be attentive to this autumn, how to be attending to the song, the arc before time runs to its one last dark stop, to pick out essential markings remembered from the guide is to pick out differences when ranges overlap and geography is song. Due south through shale hills, crossing into Susquehanna and Delaware watersheds, flare lights in the hardwoods, and tonight I read Wei Ying Wu, who wrote the jade digger on the Lan River sleeps in the cold thicket, conscript to dig, one from each family, to dig out the verdant stone, moss stone. Wei watches the vanishing river, the moon bell struck, and the conscript's wife, miles south, he wrote in 775, weeps in the cold hut, her husband gone for months. In hard times, hoe the garden of stones, eat the print of a tiger in the snow, sip from the vanished river before dawn, take from one hand and place in the other the light of a lantern, the only gold we have on this path. Everything travels, slippages through shale, fissured and laced, pores of seep, and migration upwards into limestone and aquifer, vagrant element in the rock, displaced and shunted up, methane rings, carbon releases, condensings of time and mass, tanker trucks on the gravel, access roads, deep into the hardwoods, the clear cut for long hauls, flush the Tulin and radium from the well's slick water. The snow starts to fall in the high ridges. The whippoorwills have left their calls in the leaf litter, and buckshot cans, surveyor lines, posted signs shot out with "Who the fuck cares" in dotted Morse and contrail, flash of white across the sky. All the leavings, oracles of what came to be, past the one truth that continues its seep, bloodline drip, a melody that holds a tune, one song, the unwrapping of stars. Wei Ying Wu whispers to me to slip into a boat with the early snow and oar into the lake's long reach. Chrysanthemums still bloom in the cold. Come back, show me your feelings. Wine has no taste when drinking alone. The lake a sheen of gray, early snow, geese gray and white rise from the waters as a single lifting and down pressing of wings like a rush of summer rain across the water. The years are migrations, each one to the north again. The work of creation never stops. The green half-moon scale the bare lilac, the viburnum's green knots on leafless branches. The fox sparrow lands, flying south its song to teach, to sing no destination, only direction. Sparrow in the bare bush watches me, ready to fly and gone, a bowl of air where its song was held. And then two short poems. May suspensions. The air carries its liquidity, gray sheen of shell across the pines and maples, summoning the depleted world back, as though to answer some question. That line of questioning, pushing against the air, each letter straggling. My daughter repeats Basho, morning glories, the only ones straggling to the door. Air hung with verga, nothing reaches the ground. Traveling so, who reaches their home again and again? The beach's deep rouge is shelter, dry ground, brown and dun. These are the ends, clutter and murmurs from above. And last, in time. Watching the verdant return to see, seeing it seems. Let me start that one again. Watching the verdant return to see, seeing it stems from that occipital lapis lyric of rod and cone, atlas and pyramid, lobed and flowering. I would like to think of you arriving in this air, out of seeing, then beside all accounts made finite and falling away to you, bud leaf and resinous, sun-gorged incipients. We could say all starts as speculation, spreading to breaking all rules, springing, thinking of you in time, coming to light, certain, certainly you. Thank you.
Thank you, James McCorkle. In Time. And now we have Robert Miltner, whose book is called Orpheus and Echo.
I'm going to start with Invocation, because it's a classical tale I'm telling. Orpheus, invocation to the muses. Speak to me, you gods and dogs, demijohns and ganja sticks. Reveal how alchemy charms, tongue tip against incisors, forming the voice fricative then, and the narrative for it. Enchant me to sing the crane's feather, to ink my song of loss and loss refrained, of lyrics or letters written on water, rune the location of a tree swallow's cavity, its captive secret and overture begun on an island and ending under earth. Summon a burrowing owl rising from ground nest at dusk in quest of sluggard morning doves. Its call, long, short, 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 short. Look, but do not look back. This is, I'm going to read from the first piece from the middle section. Studio session, sound check. Amps, a skyscraper Marshall stack, like Jimi Hendrix had at Electric Ladyland when he recorded And the Gods Made Love. Guitars, Lennon's Rickenbacker 12-string, Blind Boy Fuller's National Resonator Dobro, and the 1960 Fender Stratocaster Dwayne Allman played at Muscle Shoals. Acoustic guitar, restored C.F. Martin Dreadnought D28. Keyboard, Farfisa Compact Duo with foot pedals and Leslie amp. Percussion, vintage Yamaha digital rhythm drum machine, flea market Cuban maracas, Boran and gypsy tambourines. Roadies, the Titans. Background singers, Circe and the Sirens, Calypso and the Centaurs, Dionysius and the Three Dactyls. Engineer, Zeus, who demands, has this damn album got a title yet? Torn Apart by Love, says Orpheus, and Echo says, torn apart by love. Autumn Peninsula. One blue boat, 3 triangulated islands, and cliffed passages between. The desire to sail is an aquatic equation awaiting solution. Each island is its own encapsulation, both boundary and beginning, an evolved identity that is its own world, though landing offers stillness and stability and structure. I point the bow to the dividing spaces and row hard toward interstices where my wonder, uncertain in the mist, suspends among fog-cloaked coasts. Schooled fish ripple a salt sea surface. From seaweed-wrapped rocks, slow-eyed seals sing as if melancholy sirens. A solitary eagle screeches and calls its lament for the loss of autumn, as if a prologue to winter. Tonight, a cup of wine will journey out from my hand to harbor at my mouth, a rocking craft anchored without pier. Orpheus in Vegas, dream song. He turned to look back. A chorus of neon tourists tumbled from cabs and limos, from casinos pulsing poppy music. His hands hung as if busted drums, his voice entranced, vocal cords taut, tongue become stone, mouth a mute lyre, a scarecrow's ragged songs, and a glimpse of the green-eyed muse eluding and fading. How his ears ached for the sound of leaves at sunrise, seen from the island high point of Samothrace, or gusting sunset cool along shore, a duet of waves, crashing cymbals, timpani and aftermath, and the arrival of echo. Then he felt a beat in his bones, a rhythm in his wrists. He played walls like borans. Power lines grabbed and strummed became banjos. Stomped streets transformed to steel drums. And the traffic stopped to listen. And then he sang. It was as if he was Aeolus calling winds from the farthest of the west. He played his body harp, scales in major keys praising his muse, and minor keys keening her loss in an underground barking dog parking garage on the strip somewhere between Mandalay Bay and the Rio. Oh, wonder, Orpheus sang, Oh, wonder, Echo refrained and looked back, 3 salt pillars crumbling. Oh, wonder, green-eyed Eurydice joined, embracing wide-eyed Orpheus and handing him his restrung guitar. And I'll finish with this piece, Orpheus, once a traveler. The boatman rows me from sea harbor to a blue island, circular as a brass bowl. Heavy rain is as if a waterfall. I stay on the glazed craft and look across oarlocks at rocks standing longer than music or muse, torn apart by wind and eroded by centuries of storms. Loud thunderclouds move across a dark gray sky as if centaurs in sooted snow answer, reverberate, and echo. Under a plum wine dark silk sky, the ocean seems as if pressed from the skins of grapes. So I make ink, and from a blue heron feather I cut a pen so as to tattoo words in orchard rows of poetry, petitioning for the longevity of inscribed memory. My recollection is a crane's eye, so I recite poems expressing 3 true things. How trust is a tree balanced on a mountain precipice where waters fall, and how love is bee skep, is cup, is terrapin, is island rocked in the shawled arms of waves, and how autumn must close like chrysanthemums so spring can open its irises. Thank you.
Robert Miltner. One blue boat, 3 triangulated islands is what I think something of what we have in this collection. And I would like to just end by asking everybody just to talk a little bit about how your own work has been informed by this proximity, this collection. Peter, do you have anything you'd like to add to what you said earlier?
Only again that I guess that I think Robert's even in hearing his reading already made me excited again to enter the prose poem form. So that's I think one of the great things about any conversation with other writers is if you're with writers that you love, you're influenced by them, they make you do what you want. They make you want to do these things that they're doing. So both Robert and James just make me want to be a better writer, make me want to keep pushing those limits of sound and imagery and illusion. There's really beautiful stuff that they both read today. So I'm just very thankful to be part of that.
And I might add, I'm not sure if anybody realizes these books were not planned in any way to be put together, in the sense that there was no pre-writing collaboration. They came to Etruscan Press across the transom, and I love them all, and I just began to be reading one book and thinking of the others, and just hearing what I felt were correspondences, and which I hope, without intruding on one another's work, they're engaged, they're not entangled, they're engaged, and there is a conversation inherent in that in that, I don't want to say collaboration, but in that proximity. James, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think that the term proximity is really important. Obviously, that's something part of maybe my poetics or something, but I think bringing together is it's an ethical process, if you will, and also just hearing today the kind of the sonic spaces. I think that's really interesting to hear how each of us reads, but then the way in which the words materialize sound. I find pretty exciting. I find exciting, not pretty exciting, but exciting. I don't know why I qualify everything, but yeah. But it's again, the conversation. I think that's really special. Yeah. Yeah.
Robert?
I find it wonderful to hear the musicality of it. You know, I've read it and I've heard it in my head, but to actually hear it aloud and to listen to how the music is moving across, I have this sense that it's one thing to be in a room and play a guitar by yourself, but when you get the drummer and the bass player, a couple of guitarists, and it becomes a larger thing. The pieces combine to make it a larger work, and it just raises the sound quality of everything. And I really had this feeling like this was like almost a jam session today. You know, it's really, really rich and lush to my ears, and it reinforces the connection between these pieces in ways that I had to imagine before, but now I can actually hear it, and it's really a beautiful thing.
It is. We have Peter Grandbois, James McCorkle, Robert Miltner, the authors of the new book, Triptych, which is available from Etruscan Press. And I look forward to the day when we can all jam in the same room and on the other side of our current crisis. Thank you, gentlemen, for this wonderful work and this innovative and interesting reading of it, this virtual reading. Thank you again.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.